Welcome to the UIAAA Connection podcast. Hometown Ticketing is proud to be the exclusive sponsor of the UIAAA Connection podcast and to provide schools nationwide with the best options for digital ticketing for their events. Visit their website at hometownticketing.com to learn how they can make digital ticketing possible and simple at your school. Thank you to Hometown Ticketing for their exclusive sponsorship of the UIAAA Connection podcast.
Welcome back to another edition of the UIAAA Connection. I'm your host, Mark Hutch-Hunter. Today we are more than thrilled to have the Executive Director of the NIAAA, Mike Blackburn, who's also a Certified Master Athletic Administrator. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Thank you, Mark. Good to be with you.
Let's begin by having you share some of your childhood stories, where you grew up, where you went to college, your first job, those types of things.
I actually grew up in northern Indiana and was one of three brothers, Everett and Virginia Blackburn, were my folks. And it was a good life, you would think a very rural life, which we were from, but ironically, the high school that I attended was a very diverse high school because of maybe a few people have heard of, but it was originally called Bunker Hill Air Force Base, which was a Navy training base that started in, I don't know, sometime in World War II, and later became a Strategic Air Command base during Vietnam. So we had students from all over the world, very diverse school racially, but also people from many countries that attended there. So that was a unique experience, I think, of my childhood, and a beneficial one, growing up in the 60s in particular. And
well, let me just interrupt before you continue. So I'm assuming that rural Indiana would be much like rural Utah back in those days, and to have that type of diversity, I assume, was probably the exception rather than the norm.
For the most part, it would have been, and certainly in our area, but we had students from probably almost every state, or students that had lived in so many states and countries around the world. It was just a unique experience. But I was involved in football and wrestling, and dabbled in track a bit, and attended Indiana State University, obviously here in Indiana, and primarily that school because at the time it was the lowest tuition available to anyone in the state, and turned out to be a great experience. I got my bachelor's degree there, and double major in social science and physical education, health. 3 years later, got my master's, and earned a specialist degree and a PhD actually from Indiana State later on as well.
And so what was your bachelor's degree? What year would that have been?
Bachelor's degree?
Yeah.
72.
And then your master's at 75, 76?
75, yeah.
Doctorate 80?
Actually, a long time afterwards, teaching, coaching, athletic administration, assistant principal, decided to go back and finished in 2000.
Yeah, well, that's that's quite an accomplishment. Talk with our listeners in Utah and across the country about your involvement in youth sports. And you mentioned football earlier and track, and then obviously you were in coaching, and sooner or later you became the athletic director. So talk about that path.
The path of youth sports were somewhat limited. Youth sports were not then what they are today, certainly, but a little bit of little league and that type of thing. Football actually didn't start or was not offered until I entered the 7th grade. And that was, I guess, fairly common at that point in time for tackle football to start then. But just a gradual involvement in school sports all the way through. And My first teaching job and coaching was at Caston High School in Indiana, northern Indiana. As many people do coming out of college at that day, you're going to coach along with your teaching. So I was U.S. history instructor, both middle school and high school. And by the way, Mike, you are going to be the head wrestling coach at a young age, which I was not prepared for, but grew into. Assistant football coach and assistant track coach. Obviously coached 3 sports and made a salary of total $7,100.
I laugh because when I was hired in the fall of '79, I think my starting salary was $9,600. And I thought, oh my goodness, I've graduated. I have a real job. And I also, another thought that you mentioned, they told you were the wrestling coach. I had Daryl Nance on a few weeks ago. And as he explains it, they told him, you're the volleyball coach. And he said, does it matter to you that I don't know the first thing about volleyball? And the principal said, no, it's your job. And of course, I don't think that'd fly now, but that's a sign about how things have changed. Why don't you speak to our listeners about some of your mentors, teachers, coaches that had a big influence on your life?
Like so many of us, wow, that's really difficult to nail down. So many people have helped you through your character development and maturation and your spiritual life and your life as a professional. I couldn't name them all, but one person does come to mind. His name was John McElhaney, and he was my English composition teacher, and also was an assistant football coach, and kind of energetic guy, maybe 5'6", but took an interest and kind of got to me through the area of writing, and thought I had some abilities there, which I've utilized throughout life. But I just think of him oftentimes. He passed away a couple of years ago, just the interest that he took, and kind of elevating you from the uncertainty of what the future holds and where you fit and where you belong in all of this, to having a goal. And I think of him. He's certainly a representative, if you will, of hundreds of people that have been a part, all those that influenced me as a child growing up. But those that I think the largest group of people that have had an influence are those that have been in this profession of athletic administration. I can remember 4 seasoned ADs that in the first few years of my time as an athletic administrator, became one at 27. These gentlemen were towards the end of their career, but all within maybe a 30-mile radius of my school, and kind of lowered themselves down to where I was in my career and my knowledge, and advised and helped me through those early years of athletic administration. As we know today, those early years are critical, determining whether people decide to stay in the profession because of the demands of it. And they encouraged me there. But again, Bruce Whitehead as a colleague, as a fellow athletic administrator, Don Bales in the NIAAA as well as a colleague at the time, and others like them. I just can't name them all, that have influenced me positively as an individual, but also to join in the efforts of service to lift this profession that we are in of interscholastic athletic administration, and to understand the value that we have to those we serve, and ultimately to the student athletes that are coming through those programs.
Let's talk for a minute about today's athletic administrator and talk about how it's different than when you first started, or maybe when I first started, or even as much as 10 or 15 years ago, how it's changed?
I have to think back before me. I think back to my athletic director and beyond. My first athletic director in a school setting had been doing that for 25 years. So, he was working back in the 50s, and he was cutting the grass, and he was mowing the lines, and he would set up the cross country course, and he did everything physically that had to be done. And in addition to scheduling contests and officials and dealing with equipment and all of those things, but they were mostly all hands-on, tangible items that had to be done. And for me, looking back, I think I saw probably from the mid 80s to the mid 90s an exaggerated growth in responsibilities. Much of that was due to legalities and changing society and all of the lawsuits, frankly, that came through those years that affected so many areas that we were responsible for. You became, the areas of scheduling and so on simply became tasks that were ongoing, that you acclimated to, and you did from year to year. But today, the demands are just remarkable that come from state government, departments of education, boards of health, federal government, all of the things that we have dealt with most recently through COVID. If we think back to some of our earlier years, if you would have told us that's what we were going to be dealing with, we wouldn't have believed it, and we would not have been able to fathom what ADs over the past 18 months have had to deal with. Athletic trainers, coaches, the same. And I heard someone say that just recently that athletics in schools have paved the way in battling COVID and opening schools. And we were the early guinea pigs, if you will, the summer before schools reopened. And I think our people deserve just tremendous credit for adapting and trying to be on top of everything, and change after change, day after day, says a great deal. So my admiration is out there for those that serve today and do so with the character that they do.
Well said. Why don't you share with our listeners, begin with your journey in the Indiana Association, and then, of course, your journey with the NIAAA once you became the associate and now the executive director.
I became an AD at set 27, which was pretty young. I had no idea what I was getting into, but the athletic administrator the day left his assignment in August of the school year just starting, and they asked if I might like to serve in a intermediate role, so to speak, and they would open the job up at the end of the year. And so that started my story, and moved on from there. I was an athletic administrator for 28 years in one school, and which is remarkable in itself. But all of those years, my first year as an AD was the first year of the NIAAA when we got our start. And the Indiana.
And that would have been what year for those
that was
that don't
77.
know?
Yeah, 70 school year 77. I became involved in Indiana Interscholastic Athletic Administrators. Probably the first area was a section representative to the board, and had the opportunity to work as the second and vice president and president in the mid-90s, and served as secretary for 13 years, I think, something like that. Now, not that many, more like 8 years. and became involved with NIAAA on the Publications Committee, served on there for 13 years. And when Frank Kowaleski decided he was retiring and they opened a executive director position, Frank had been the national director, actually applied for that and interviewed among the final four, and Bruce Whitehead was that selection. And that was in a September, I think, of 2004. And then once things began in January and he took over the board shortly thereafter, created an associate executive director position. He was fortunate enough to apply and be named to that and served in that capacity for 11 years. Just been a tremendous, that was a tremendous 11 years. I tell Bill Risen today that he has the best job in the NIAAA. It's a unique role where you can really get to know the membership and all of those serving the NIAAA. And the growth that took place from 2005 till today in membership and in leadership training and certification and all of the outreaches that the NIAAA now offers. It's been tremendous to see that continue to prosper.
Speak to those numbers for those of our listeners, which is probably quite a few, that don't understand what the membership was like, what the certification totals were like back in 2005, and now it's 2021. Talk about that great growth that we've had.
Well, beginning with membership, we were, for 15 years, we had languished in the 5,000s, anywhere from 5,100 to 5,900. And it had gone back and forth. If you graphed it out, it's just a gradual slight movement up and down. And we took that
So
as
pretty much a plateau then.
It really was a plateau. And some people told us that, you're never going to go above, where you're at right now. We'll never reach 6,000 and so on and so forth. And some of those were people heavily involved in the organization, but we felt different. That's kind of the one thing that I've taken an interest in initially and tried to not only encourage, but to recognize states for what they have done, not really pit one state against another, but competition, or to the point where, hey, if Ohio's doing it, then if we're in Michigan, we'd like to be doing that as well. And more than anything, I think we've created an atmosphere where leaders in states understand that in order to best serve their athletic administrators within the state, those people need to be a part of the NIAAA. They need to be a part of leadership training and certification. They need to aspire to continue to grow professionally. And for that reason, if you want what's best for your members, the NIAAA is a large part of that. And our states are doing a tremendous job. At the same time, some of what they utilize is what the NIAAA offers. And I would say that the reason it's so successful is because of grassroots efforts by our members in the states. Without their ingenuity and their dedication, their authorship, just so many of our ideas, things that have become reality, have started with one or a small group of athletic directors in a given state. Leadership training at that time, Mark, was probably in the area of 25 courses.
Yeah.
So we will acknowledge number 52 and 53 LTI courses in December in Denver at the National Conference. And we almost are saying we need to slow down a little bit because we're having difficulty going through the regular process of piloting courses twice and making that work out. But we know there's 4 more that are being developed now. And as you know, from being at the summit of our professional development leadership, there's 4 more ideas out there that could become reality. So we're approaching that 60 course level, and that's a tremendous a tremendous growth over a 15-year period.
Well, it's strange to think. My first conference would have been in 97 in Nashville. And I believe, you can correct me on this, I believe the year before in Orlando is when they had the first 501, which I hear was an 8-hour course. And then if I remember right, then they split it out into 4 courses and ran the 4 separate courses, maybe in Nashville for the first time. But speak to that.
I remember being in that class in Kansas City at a July meeting, being on publications. I think they probably lengthened our stay, and we all took that first LTI 501. And it was a long day, I would have to say that.
Mm-hmm.
And the immediate discussion was, we probably need to divide this, and this needs to be 2 courses. We thought it was kind of brought to us that this was everything an athletic administrator needed to know in an 8-hour class. And after taking the 8-hour class, we fully knew that first it needed to be divided, and secondly that we were going to go way beyond 4 hours or 8 hours of instruction. So
absolutely,
some great people that were involved in that initial. Frank Kowaleski was one of the leaders in that area, but John Olson and Jim Watkins, Jim Teff were 3 of the key early. Dwayne Kramer and Don Bales, all of those people have been involved for a number of years. So, but it was a nucleus of people, and now it is a fully grassroots movement, quite honestly, among 100 or so PDA state coordinators that foster it.
Let me have you get a chance to talk about the upcoming conference in Denver, because obviously it's a huge task for you and Phil and the people that work in the office. But I wanted to give you the platform to share with our listeners here in Utah and across the U.S. about what exactly it is, in case you haven't been to a national conference, and why you need to be there and continue coming. So I'm gonna turn it over to you and let you plug that.
Well, our national conference is a tremendous learning experience. Our people say that they attend primarily, number one reason is because of networking with other athletic administrators. They love the idea of being able to sit and share, not only learn in a classroom, but to share ideas and bounce things off of people and compare notes and so on. This will be our 54th such conference, and we are hopeful and expectant of a great crowd. The leading up to COVID, in our virtual conference that we were forced to have last year conduct, which was very successful. And it is among, quite honestly, the virtual conference also is among the top 5 attended conferences out of the 53 held. So we've surpassed the 2,000 attendee mark, actual athletic administrators that are in attendance. And we knew that Tampa last year, that had to be canceled. I think there's no question it would have been the largest conference ever with the growth that we had seen over the past 4 years leading up to it. But we're going back there in 25. So we look forward to that. And the option for those that are not aware of the national conference is all 53 of those LTI courses that I mentioned will be taught in 4 sessions. So there'd be opportunity to sign up and take 4 different courses if they chose to. There's 40 workshop sessions. This year, they're all going to be unique titles, not repeats of any kind, with them being, in many cases, the PowerPoint or whatever the case may be shared at the end of the conference. We felt it was best to get as many topics as a part as we can. There's 2 general sessions with keynote speakers. We have a hot topic session with whatever is a key for that year. This year it's student mental health that'll be spoken on there. And Lee Green, of course, will do his year-end sports and review. But there's so many other opportunities. The NIAAA will have 50 different meetings as a part of that. And of course, we host that in conjunction with the NFHS. And it's a time of acknowledging our award winners, those people that have meant so much to the organization. This year, we will have a Friday night, December 10th, 2020 recognition of Distinguished Service Awards, our Award of Merit, our Kovalevsky Award, Frederick Award, and then induction of our 2020 Hall of Fame. And then the 2021 will occur in its natural position on the conference schedule on Tuesday evening. And we'll be inducting 10 Hall of Famers that night, as well as 10 DSAs and the 3 that I just mentioned. And of course, the NFH citations will take place at the luncheon, and they'll be doubling up 8 sections, 16 over those 2 years that will be ADs that will be recognized with the citation at the luncheon.
So let me clarify something that you just said that I hadn't thought of. So the Friday night, which we've never done on a Friday night before, would be the NIAAA 2020 winners. But the Federation then is just going to have to squeeze it into the luncheon for their 8 winners this year and the 8 winners the previous year.
That's their plan. I think their summer meeting, they dispensed with the 2020 maybe and did not make presentations. I think that is the way it worked out. But we just felt that the 2020 people, even though they have received their press releases and they've received their awards and recognition, we wanted to recognize them before their peers, and we felt that this was the best way with the numbers involved for that to be handled. So we certainly welcome everyone that's attending on Friday night. To be a part of that is a 7 o'clock start, and it will be a little bit different. It's not a banquet, but it will be the same presentations on stage. And Lannis Robinson, our 2020 board president, will be making those presentations. And of course, Lisa Langston, our current president, will be making the Tuesday night award presentations.
Excellent. So let me follow up with something. I say this so maybe you can answer this for I think we're sending 7 Utah first-time attendees this year, but of course I know we're not the only state that's doing that. So what would you say to these 7 in Utah and these hundreds across the U.S. that are attending the first time about what are maybe some not missed things that you want to make sure to take advantage of as a first-time attendee? Because I can remember, like I said before, when I was at Nashville, I was just wide-eyed and blown away and just tried to soak up everything I could, maybe too much. So give some advice to our first-time attendees.
I think your advice of what you did is the best. Jump in, get involved, attend everything you can attend. Some people say they're coming off of the role at their school. They're looking for a little downtime. I think anyone that's attended the National Athletic Directors Conference will find that it's not like some other educational conferences. It
Exactly.
is nonstop from morning till night. The schedule that will be that is available on our website under conference will give you the areas that you can attend. In addition to those, there are so many other evening events and so on that are by invitation only. But what I'm saying is we run that from, some of those meetings begin at 7 o'clock. We have 3 board meetings throughout the life of the conference over those 5 days. And you'll go from 7 o'clock until 8 o'clock in the evening if you choose to. So attend those workshops, sign up for leadership training, make sure you hit the general sessions, the hot topic session, the sports law and review, find opportunities to network with other ADs, and that will be spontaneous and it will happen because there's just a mutual understanding, a mutual respect among everybody that's there. There's not many of us in the United States, and we're all in this situation that's very, very similar, regardless of where we reside and where we work. We have some unique problems in our demographic, but at the same time, most of the things we face in working with middle school and high school athletics, with parents, with students, we can learn from one another.
Let me ask you, what is the favorite part of your job? And before you answer, I want to break that into two, because I'm guessing that the favorite part of your job when you were a high school athletic administrator may be different, maybe not, than the favorite part of your job now that you've been out of the building for 15 years and now you're the executive director of a national group. So maybe address the favorite part of your job when you were in the building and the favorite part of your job in the office.
Probably for most all of us, the favorite part of our job as an athletic administrator is the same as it was as a coach, and that's working with kids, seeing kids develop, helping them not only physically through athletics, but in so many other areas of their development as future leaders. And that doesn't change when you become an athletic administrator. You probably agree with me that that's the first thing that you miss, is having that everyday practice, contest, interaction with kids.
Oh, I agree. Continue.
I can remember the first day that I was on the job with Bruce. I was the associate with the NIAAA, and we were in the NFHS offices at that time for 2 years. Tim Flannery, which many of you remember, that started the NFHS Learn, the current NFHS Learn Coaching Education. He stopped in, poked his head in the office, and he said, "Once you get over the guilt, it'll be fine." And he walked away. I had to think at the time, exactly what did he mean? But I fully recognized, because I was feeling the guilt of being out of a school I had been in for so many years, being away. There were no kids stopping by your office. There was not even a parent coming in to scream at you about anything. I'm isolated in this office building in downtown Indianapolis, and we're doing great work. But I could name that day of the week what the date was in a given month, and I could tell you what was occurring at my former high school on that day. Because I've been doing it so long, I knew what it was. I knew what contests were being held, and for a while could even tell you if it was home or away. But he meant, when you get over that guilt, then you'll settle into this position. But it was an adjustment. So that tells me where my priorities were and what were enjoyable, and that was doing what we did. That's why we got into teaching. That's why we coached. Even that's why you're an administrator, is to serve those kids. And as I say, they're the people that will be determining the future. And in the role today, it's no different, in the sense that the greatest thing is the interaction with our members, the interaction at the conference, whether it's, I'm kind of zoomed out, as many of you are, over 18 months, but a simple phone call with someone who's in a state that they're facing a challenge, they're facing a difficulty. It may be something that they made a misjudgment on. It may be something that, as we know, happens sometimes politically in school districts. It may be something that they couldn't control, but it's affecting them negatively, and they're wanting help, assistance, advice. And many times that's all we can offer is a shoulder, and listen, and provide them with advice based on your experiences. Sometimes it is, and that's the most difficult kind of help that we can offer, but that's why we're here.
Sure. It struck me as you were speaking about that and about being zoomed out. Just speak for a moment. I know that's not one of the talking points, but we just got back from the coordinator summit. Well, I didn't get back. You're still in Indiana, but it's been 2 years, and I realized we met last year, and I realized it was a Zoom, but my goodness, I thought to myself and mentioned to others, it was a hug fest for like 20 minutes. I can't imagine what it's going to be like once we get to Denver, because there'll be so many more people there. And you talk about those associations. I just have such a great feeling about what went on there at the summit last weekend, and about how, boy, you just miss those people nationally.
No question, no question. We really started last July. The board had to decide if they were going to, after meeting Zoom for a year, if they were going to come back to meet together, and they chose to do so. So during that week after the 4th of July, we had the board, we had a couple of courses piloted, we had publications committee, we had our leadership team of professional development all came in, and it was exactly as you just described it then. Everybody was so glad to see one another. In September, just a few days ago, we met in Indianapolis with those 90 coordinators, and the feeling was the same. And we noticed, quite honestly, as people began to leave when it was dismissed, the tables were hugging people that had not known each other or not known each other well, sitting at the same table for 3 days. And the exercises that they go through during that 3 days in leadership and responsibility, the appreciation, I guess, that they develop for one another was seen as they began to leave, and they were exchanging contact information. And it's a profession that, if you remain in it for a while, it's a life changer. It's lifelong friends. There's no question. You can speak to that. I can speak to that. And that's the one thing that is difficult about athletic administration. One of those is life balance, and the time that you have to put in. I just encourage you to communicate thoroughly with your spouse, with your leadership, your educational leaders in your school district. Continually let them know, I'm not overworked, but is this a position with your expectation of hours from early morning till late at night and Saturdays, and then trying to get your office work done oftentimes on Sunday afternoon? This is a position that has evolved over the years from those grass cutting and field lining days that I mentioned earlier to what we have today of a true professional responsibility that has so many facets to it. Would you today create a position such as that and create that job description as to what it does look like now in many cases? I think the answer, I've been told this before, I would not create something like that. It would be different. So we, while protecting our roles within the schools, we have to be vocal about what the demands are and what it should look like, not only for me in that role as an athletic administrator, but for the future, those people that come after me, and try to develop a position that assists that individual in their own well-being, but also assist them in being a spouse and a father and whatever other responsibilities they may have. And oftentimes the role doesn't allow you to get your hair cut, make a doctor's appointment, or have your car serviced, or whatever the case may be. It's a difficult challenge.
True enough. Very well said. As we wrap things up, let me ask you this, that we ask all the guests on the show. If you're talking to a new athletic administrator, in my book, someone new is 1 to 4 years, and you could give them 2 pieces of advice that you absolutely need to do these 2 things in order to be a successful athletic administrator in today's world, what would those 2 things be?
Well, you're not going to last long if you don't have an industrious nature. In other words, yes, you have to get the work done, One would be to do everything you can to balance, find ways to balance it. Tim Graham from Washington, I can remember him talking about, and I experienced this myself, my wife bringing lunch and 3 little kids along to the between practices, or we met in the weight room, or wherever I would be, that's where they would be. So it does take a great deal of understanding on the part of the family, if you will, and don't treat those children of other people any differently than you would your own. Remember them, give them their due love and time. I don't think advice-wise, I guess I would simply say you'll never regret being a person of integrity. You'll never regret being known as an honest and upright person of character. So follow those traits, and that will take you certainly a long way in your profession, the respect you will have.
Thank you for that. Let's finish up with this question. What question should I have asked you that I failed to ask you?
I think you've exhausted all of your questions, and perhaps mine, Mark. We're good.
All right. Well, that wraps up another edition of the UIAAA Connection. Once again, our guest this week has been Mike Blackburn, CMAA, and most importantly, the Executive Director of the NIAAA. Thanks for being on the show, Mike.
My pleasure. Hello to everyone out there.
For our listeners, please tune in next week when there'll be another edition of the UIAAA Connection.